In some critical areas, such as advanced munitions, which when it comes to war is pretty damn relevant, his assessment is that China leads by magnitudes. As a reminder, an order of magnitude means 10x or so. By assuming he knows that and meant what he said, magnitudes would mean at least 100 times more, meaning that U.S. capabilities would be less than 1% of those of China. At the same time, Culver also says that whichever side runs out of bullets first is going to lose. And I think we both know. I think we both know which side is going to run out of bullets first, right? Let's get started in situation monitoring, global politics, geopolitical events taking place, taking shape all around the world, but especially in China. Donald Trump and his legion of fucking losers is currently out in Beijing living my dream. Okay, they got the red carpet rolled out. There's obviously been some back and forth, and there's been some controversy on the trip thus far. One of the worst controversies has been what kind of dog shit food they were serving on Air Force One that was supposed to be Chinese. And I don't know how to explain this to you. That is probably the biggest war crime of all time. Yeah, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang wasn't supposed to make it on the trip initially, but he actually intercepted Air Force One in Alaska. We talked about this yesterday, so I think it's interesting that Jensen Huang was kind of disinvited, or he didn't want to go on the trip initially, which I thought was interesting because Jensen Huang is obviously he's one of those guys who's like petitioning the government to not restrict NVIDIA sales to China, because he believes that China's going to get there in technology anyway, so they might as well sell them. They might as well sell them NVIDIA products like the latest technology. Therefore, Jensen Huang can still make billions of dollars. And also, he personally believes that this is better because this way they will have a reliance on NVIDIA products instead of making their own competitive chips. But it turns out that beef was maybe short-lived, or wasn't a beef at all, because Donald Trump invited him. He was caught. He was papped on a Alaskan runway getting on Air Force One. They literally stopped at Alaska, picked him up. Dude, the way these guys live is so crazy. They're like, oh yeah, I'll hitch a ride on Air Force One to Beijing. Let me just fly my private jet from, I don't know, San Francisco to fucking Alaska, and you can pick me up in Alaska on the route. Anyway, New York Times has extensive reporting on what the Trump side demands are most likely going to look like. Trump obviously went to China with a contingency of some of the wealthiest people, okay, including Brett Ratner. Weirdly enough, I think Brett Ratner, is that real? Is he actually on the China trip as well? That's very strange. Like, it almost feels like Donald Trump was like, no, we're gonna bring Jeffrey Epstein affiliates. Okay, I really wanted Jeffrey Epstein affiliates to come to China. We want the Epstein class to have a foothold inside of China, as a matter of fact. Now, yeah, I retweeted this as well. 12 of the most powerful capitalists on earth flew to Beijing today with the U.S. president as their chaperone to beg the chairman of the Communist Party of China for deals. That's pretty much what is going on here. Now, in a just world, obviously, if we were living in a just world, I mean, I'm not going to say it, but if we had a Chinese-style form of governance, we'd be prosecuting some of these billionaires, not flying them around the world so that they can make even more billions. But we don't live in a just world. We live in a world dominated by capital. So, anyway, let's start here.
President Trump touching down in China as the war with Iran looms large. But this is not the visit the president had initially planned. He had hoped to arrive in China victorious over Iran, with momentum to seal deals on trade and technology. Instead, the standstill in the war taking center stage. Trump insists he doesn't need Chinese President Xi's help to end the conflict.
And the way conflicts play out, Iran is showing the world that through the successful productive forces, asymmetric warfare, and tunneling your entire defense industry underground, you are capable of withstanding tremendous amounts of pain and punish the rest of the world. as long as you're sitting on a 21-mile wide strip, straight, that 20% of the global energy supply transits through. But America has shown the world that it's incapable of defending its own fucking bases against Iran. So, I continue. This is undoubtedly the single most stunning revelation in the entire piece. Culver says that as far as he is aware, the Pentagon's plan in the case of war with Taiwan is to simply flee. This is the exact quote. I think some of the thinking in the Pentagon, and maybe it has evolved since I retired, is that when we think there's going to be a war, we need to get our high-value naval assets out of the theater. And then we would have to fight our way back in. From where, it's not clear. Guam is no bastion either. Now why? South Korea is right there. So is Japan. So is Taiwan. The problem is, Iran has shown that even a middle power, even a regional power, is capable of dishing out tremendous punishment if they have the productive capabilities. And if there's one country that has infinitely more productive capabilities than fucking Iran, it's China. So if Iran can lob inexpensive Shahed drones and cut through American defenses in the Gulf, one of the most fortified American positions on the planet, as a direct consequence of 20 plus years of colonial domination in the region. This is the Middle East we're talking about. America's had its tentacles in the Middle East for 25 years. Okay, longer than 25 years, but certainly accelerated in the past 25 years. And if Iran, as a regional power, is capable of blowing up American military bases, blowing up radar installations, and even destroying the idea of Dubai, as they've been able to do so successfully by making it uninhabitable for Western capital, making it uninhabitable for expats, then what the fuck do you think China could do to South Korea, to Japan, and also to Taiwan? America knows that it does not have the defensive capabilities to even protect their own assets in that region, because that region is in striking distance, okay? Any high-value assets would be sitting ducks in the entire arena. China can strike U.S. forces deployed to Japan, Australia, or even South Korea in a way that Iran really can't. And given that Iran has hit at least 228 targets across U.S. bases in the Middle East, forcing the U.S. to evacuate most of them, that's saying something. Also, U.S. aircraft carriers would need to operate within 1,000 miles of the fight to matter, which, given it's well within the range of Chinese missiles, they won't. As Culver bluntly puts it, there's really no safe spaces. Second point that's also important. China leads in most military domains, and it's not even close. Culver says it's hard not to be hyperbolic about China's military capabilities, and that at this stage, it's hard to point to an area other than submarines and undersea warfare and say that the United States still has an advantage. This is the one that pisses off everyone that I talk to in the realm of defense, okay? I know a lot of engineers, as you know, and whenever I bring this stuff up, some of them are like, no, you don't even understand, dude. They go into, some of these people are brilliant people, okay? And I'm not even talking about Murat. Some of these people are brilliant people. They've worked in some of these companies, okay? They have their hands in this shit. Obviously, they won't reveal any information that's classified. But do you ever start the stream to be normal or just cry about it? I don't even know what that means. What did you imply? What? Do you ever start stream to be normal or just cry about this shit? Brother, I'm a fucking political commentator. What are you talking about? I'm doing political commentary. I'm talking about America's force projection capabilities and how much is diminished around the globe in comparison to a peer adversary like China, as opposed to like a decade ago, and what the Taiwanese relationship with America looks like now. That's my job. This is such a funny thing. I mean, I'll take a brief moment here. I know people get really annoyed when I do this, but it's such a funny thing to complain about, because this is literally like the same thing you could say to like Jake Tapper. You'd be like, oh, this guy fucking yapping about the news again. It's like, yeah, bitch, you tuned in to the channel. Do you fucking tune into the NFL and go, oh my God, dude, I can't believe they're playing football again. What the fuck, man? I hate this. Every fucking Monday night, every Sunday. Football, football, football. Why is there no Taylor Swift on the TV? Puts on suits for a week and you think you're a political commentator? Yeah. Yeah. All 13 plus years of doing this. I put on a suit once. Nobody cared about me until I put on the mask. You know, nobody cared about me until I put on the suit. But yeah, getting back into it. So China has a lot of advantages and made significant strides in technological innovation, and also has a very clear productive advantage, an advantage in the realm of production in comparison to the United States of America. In some critical areas, such as advanced munitions, which when it comes to war is pretty damn relevant, his assessment is that China leads by magnitudes. As a reminder, an order of magnitude means 10x or so. By assuming he knows that and meant what he said, magnitudes would mean at least 100 times more, meaning that U.S. capabilities would be less than 1% of those of China. At the same time, Culver also says that whichever side runs out of bullets first is going to lose. And I think we both know. I think we both know which side is going to run out of bullets first, right? If America is running out of bullets in Iran, America's running out of bullets in China way faster, okay? As a matter of fact, America is almost already out of bullets, and not a single bullet has been fired in the direction of China. Something to also pay attention to. The picture, if anything, is even more damning in shipbuilding capabilities. This is something that has been discussed quite a bit. He reminds us that a single shipyard in China, Jiangnan Shipyard on Chongqing Island near Shanghai, has capacity, more capacity than all U.S. shipyards combined. Put all these Chinese shipyards together, and China's broader naval shipbuilding capacity is 232 times larger than that of the United States. And this is from a leaked U.S. Navy briefing slide. Culver helpfully adds that China deploys enough ships every year to replicate the entire French Navy, which is, you know, supposed to be the second most powerful in the world after the United States of America, or I guess if you don't factor China. Screen not shared? Yes, it doesn't matter. It's just fucking bits and pieces from an article that is being summarized on Twitter. So I'm just reading it. What do you want? Like, what changes if you actually see the article in front of your screen? Anyway, backseat production. So funny. Culver's assessment is the exact opposite. If your only window into the number 3, despite this, a war in Taiwan is still highly unlikely. Okay. A war in Taiwan is still highly unlikely, in spite of all of this, or maybe because of all of this information. Obviously, if you're getting all your news from Western media, you think China is always trying to fucking militarily overtake Taiwan. This is the number one thing that people talk about. And I constantly say, I don't think that's the case. Obviously, there's no guarantees, but it doesn't feel to be the case at all. And people say, oh, dude, you're dick riding Xi Jinping. You're dick riding Xi Jinping. You want to eat the dick of the Communist Party of China, all this stuff. I'm just giving you what I think. I'm just giving you analysis. And this assessment, our note and I guess Culver's assessment is entirely at odds with one another. China's increasing relative strength vis-a-vis the United States makes more less likely, not more. That's what Culver's assessment is. Culver explains Taiwan is a crisis Xi Jinping wants to avoid, not an opportunity he wants to seize. The stronger China gets, the less it needs to fight. Why launch a war when you can simply wait for the military to balance to become so lopsided that the U.S. quietly drops its security guarantees on its own? Culver himself foresees a future when Americans might start to say, maybe Taiwan is a war we don't want to get involved in. That would almost automatically mean peaceful reunification, which has always been China's primary objective. This doesn't mean China views the U.S. as harmless, however. Culver says Beijing sees America as a very militarily aggressive country that is declining in power and becoming more violent as a result, which he says is one further reason why war over Taiwan is not something that Xi Jinping is looking for. I think this assessment is correct, okay? I think that assessment is correct. The Chinese assessment on America is correct. It's one that I also share. It's one that I also mention all the time, that America is a declining empire, and a declining empire does not die quietly. It flings violently. Sometimes a declining empire is smart enough to target smaller and smaller targets where it can make its force projection capabilities be known. This is why Venezuela was under threat and America seized it. This is also part of the reason why I really worry about what America will do in Cuba. On the one hand, even the smart, limited military ambitions would still spell trouble for middle powers and smaller countries, developing nations that are within striking distance of the United States, especially when China very clearly has no ambitions of propping them up defensively or disrupting America's affairs in its own backyard. That's just the way big powers see these things. That's the way great powers see these things. I know it's really gross to think about Cuba or the entirety of Latin America as being in America's own backyard. It's colonial language, but it's just how great powers see the world, right? If Taiwan is China's backyard, then Latin America, and especially Cuba, is America's backyard. That's just the way they communicate on this stuff. There is no morality here. There is no investment in the sovereignty of peoples here. None whatsoever. Number 4, the last takeaway is that the game is up. Last but not least, perhaps the most revealing aspect of the interview is that Culver doesn't seem to see a way out. This is structural and irreversible. Once again, I also agree. I cannot believe I'm saying this, but I agree with the assessment of the CIA analyst. Asked by Boot whether the Trump administration's $1.5 trillion defense budget, assuming it's approved, would change the trend lines, which, as a reminder, would constitute a 50% increase in defense spending, his reply is that it would probably help to some extent, but I worry that we would be throwing good money after bad, not exactly brimming with optimism. Imagine a CIA guy being interviewed by a massive neocon, Max Boot, on the motherfucking Washington Post, and he's saying, we're done. Throw the fucking towel. We're out spending money unnecessarily. Like he's a fucking liberal blowhard. Okay? Like this is the assessment of anti-war libtards in perpetuity. This is what the anti-imperialists have been saying. We must chart a different path forward, one that revolves around peace and diplomacy, and not might is right politics or might makes right politics necessarily. And now you're hearing that from fucking neocons and CIA analysts whose entire job is to say America is the most domineering force. It's the hegemon. It gets to do whatever it wants to, and you can't see a damn thing about it. And we should give unlimited money to the defense industry. Now, there's 2 problems here with the unlimited contracts, and this is something that also was proven decisively, okay, unambiguously proven. Defense bloat cannot make up. Defense bloat is the primary factor in why American expenditures does not necessarily mean American military superiority, does not necessarily mean unlimited munitions. Defense bloat is the reason why a country that designs its defense industry for survival is going to have, by way of asymmetric warfare, a much better option, a much better position overall in a war of attrition, which is what all wars are. Ukraine has shown this against Russia. Ukraine showed this against Russia. Obviously, they got a shit ton of weapons from the Western world, but outside of that, they created an indigenous drone industry, and that changed the game of warfare. Bro, you are spitting some total nonsense. Okay, big guy, you tell me what you think. Hasan's still glazing China. I'm literally talking about Ukraine right now and Iran. This has nothing to do with China. Bro, what are you talking about, lol? Okay, we got 3 different backgrounds here. We got gray name, 1-month subscriber, 15-month subscriber. All of this comes across as very complicated for some reason. That's my first comment, though, was checking. Okay, you get a second off. All right. What are you talking about? You don't think Russia has indigenous use value centrally planned defense production? No, it does. It does. And so does the United States of America. Do you not hear the words that are coming out of my mouth? Even if you have a robust defense industry like Russia does with drone warfare, if your goal is survival, right? If your goal is survival, as Ukraine's goal is survival, they can put up a fairly strong defense against a much more powerful regional power. This is just to say regional powers have a harder time dominating their neighborhood than they ever did before because of drone warfare. All right. Hopefully that was asked and answered. Ukraine held out because of us? No, absolutely. Oh, Trey's still here still. She knows the PLA is not ready, bro. Why the fuck do you think they do nothing but edge? Again, an Amerifat cannot comprehend that other countries don't have the same ambitions or don't have the same methods of domination. Even if we were to agree, what's good? Even if we were in agreement that like this is what the goal is for China. China wants to be a hegemon. That's all China wants to do. March is here. Okay? Okay, great. Obviously oh yeah, I got it. It's over here. It's perfect. Wait, I don't want to preview it on my OBS. Oh, I don't want to do that. Do it on your wait, you have a laptop with you? You have an extra laptop with you? Okay, then you can do it on your extra laptop. Because that might accidentally fuck up the yeah. Bro, in China, you would be in prison for speaking your mind. Good luck getting free speech in China. Do you want to live in a dictatorship because that's what China is, buddy? How do we not have an aura edit of me in China? You know, like that's what, buddy, what are we talking about? Look at this.
Yeah, Hasan. No. Oh, okay, cool. I'm actually kidding. What a buzzkill.
You want a piece of it? Okay.
That's me. You're probably wondering how I got here. That's me. Next to my podcast co-host and best friends in fucking Tiananmen Square, live broadcasting to the United States of America in real time from the Tiananmen Square flag raising ceremony. Stop saying you are not Chinese. It hurts my feelings, and it's also untrue, deeply untrue. In any case, similarly, when asked why the U.S. keeps investing in billions in aircraft carriers, even when Trump's class battleships, his answer, that is because the military services have a nostalgia for the things that meet their expectations for how you get promoted. In other words, wasted money. Okay? That's all this is. Capitalism has necessitated imperialism. Okay? Profit rates have a tendency to decline. You look for new markets to dominate, to extract natural resources from. You seek out new profit centers around the world. And the only way to maintain that profitability in these emerging markets, in these developing nations, is by dominating them militarily. This is why you need to engage in imperialism. This is why you build a robust industry of defense. However, capitalism is a self-defeating system. And that is precisely the reason why, at a certain point, in the aftermath of World War II, when American defense capabilities turned around and no longer cared as much about survivability, no longer cared as much about having technological superiority, but instead cared about justifying its own existence, it became this massive behemoth. And that's the reason why we spend more money than 8 of our peer competitors combined. 8 of the next biggest militaries combined barely touches the American defense, the American defense expenditure. However, Donald Trump wants to increase that to the tune of $1.5 trillion. And even then, the amount of money spent on the military doesn't actually make the military a more competent, more robust, more successful fighting force. Because these contracts that are given to the defense industry are not given to the defense industry so that it can actually destroy its adversaries. These contracts are given so that people make money. Okay? That's it. That's it. The defense industry exists currently to justify its own existence. It doesn't exist to like actually defend the United States of America. Okay? It's a system of middle managers trying to cut side deals and engage in cons all the way down. That's all this is. We know this as defense bloat. Okay? And this was my suspicion for many, many years. But we no longer have to suspect that there is defense bloat. And it has made America a less successful country as far as enforcing its wishes upon near peer adversaries, peer adversaries, but instead even on regional powers, okay? Third tier countries that we have been able to dominate economically, like Iran. Iran proved that it doesn't fucking matter if you spend trillions of dollars on your defense industry. March and you sleep in the same bed? Yeah. When we have sex, we do. Anyway, same thing for the Pentagon's much-hyped hellscape drone strategy to defend Taiwan. Culver asked the obvious question. What drones are you talking about launching from where? He points out that they'd have to pre-deploy them, if not on Taiwan itself, then on Luzon or the Japanese Southwest Islands, all of which can be struck by the Chinese. He adds that this is the tyranny of time and distance when you look at the war in the Pacific, okay? Trump will look at all of this and say, you guys are naysayers. These are not cynical, peace-loving doves. These are some of the most prominent war hawks that are looking at the board, that are looking at the numbers on the board, that are looking at America's capabilities, matching them against the Chinese capabilities, and saying, there is no way to math it out. There is no way to game theory your way out of this, okay? It's not happening. And this reality has been apparent for those with eyes to see. I've been talking about this nonstop. One of the best examples we can use, someone brought it up in the chat as well, is the difference between Shahed drones, which are $7,000 to $10,000 a pop to make, basically a fucking behemoth of a lawnmower with explosive ordnance attached to it, unbelievably successful in destroying billions of dollars worth of military equipment so far in the Gulf. America basically took a Shahed drone that was downed and retooled it. They took the exact same thing, they copied it 1-to-1, and they slapped a Made in America sticker on it, Made in the USA sticker on it. Our version of the Shahed drone is called Lucas. It's $50,000 a pop, which is unbelievably affordable for the American military industry, right? The MIC, the military industrial complex, $50,000 a drone is actually very, very cheap. You're joking? No, I'm not joking. They took the same damn thing, they put a Starlink on it, and they called it Lucas. That's exactly the same drone. It looks exactly the same. It works exactly the same. The only difference is it has a Starlink, like a little Starlink thing on top of it. $50,000. This is what I mean when I say defense bloat. This is what I mean when I say we are not competitive. The picture that emerges, Arnaud summarizes, from both Booth's Culver interview and Kagan's article is remarkably consistent. The U.S. is checkmate in the Middle East, would need to entirely flee the Pacific theater before a war even starts, cannot produce enough weapons, cannot keep its supposed allies safe, and has no strategy to reverse any of it, nor can one even be produced, given the structural nature of the gap. Even a 50% increase in defense spending, Culver says, would be throwing good money after bad. Two of America's most prominent hawks in two of the most established outlets, legacy papers, in a space of 48 hours have essentially published the obituary of American military primacy. Arnaud says, yesterday I concluded my post by saying that even arsonists smelled the smoke. Today I'll say the arsonists are now writing the fire report. New, the U.S. would struggle to find a protracted war with China due to a lack of long-range munitions, air defense systems, and unmanned air, undersea, and surface systems, finds CSIS Defense. Another one. These guys are not our allies, by the way. They're not our allies at all. These are people, these are demonic entities that have been a cancerous force, constantly advancing the interests of the military-industrial complex. They are literally funded by the military-industrial complex. Some of these articles that they're writing specifically to justify bigger and better equipment. That means more dollars, CSIS, more dollars coming to their donors, right? Their corporate donors. But this is still important analysis. This is why I said what I said at Yale, at the Yale Union speech. Whether we think American empire should end or not is immaterial to what is actually going on. No matter what that resolution was at Yale Union, which was, it favored my perspective, of course. American empire is ending. And we have an obligation to future generations and the rest of the world to ensure that we manage that end of American empire. Will it end violently as we lash out at any and every country we can? Or will we retreat from the world, lick our wounds, and focus on rebuilding this country with all of the wealth that we currently have? It's that simple.
Empires never die quietly, and we must end the American empire regardless. But we must manage the retreat of a superpower from the world stage. This is a challenge for our time. Actually, this is the challenge for our time. Because if we do not do this, then the American empire will come to an end in a much more violent way. A curse on future generations that we must avoid at all costs. Thank you.
I think, personally, my Oxford Union speech was somewhat prophetic about what I called out and what I said was going to happen if all these pro-Israel groups kept talking about how all Jews care about is Israel over and over again, and how damaging that would be to the safety and security of Jews in the Western world. That was 2 years ago. That's already unfolding. And this is the other one. Hopefully one day we'll look back at those speeches honestly and say, damn, how did this guy get it right? Maybe some people will ask, why didn't we see these warning signs? And then they'll recognize it's because he was also dealing with some of the dumbest fucking reactionaries on the internet and constantly finding himself in drama after drama, manufactured outrage. So we didn't pay attention to what the fuck he was saying because we got duped by some of the stupidest people on the internet into believing that this guy was deeply unserious, didn't have anything worth listening to. Now, of course, obviously, there are intelligent people who do recognize that some of the things I'm saying are worth listening to. Okay? Thank God that there are still literate people with functioning fucking brains. It's just that we now live in a society that increasingly pays less attention to people like that. Not myself. I'm saying like much more brilliant and genuinely well-read people, not just a silly dummy like myself, right? Now let's get back to Good Morning America's analysis on Donald Trump's arrival in China.
Iran's closest allies buying more Iranian oil than any other country. Trump expected to urge Xi to pressure Tehran to make a deal and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. With the war now in its 11th week, this morning there are new questions about whether the White House is overstating the damage done to Iran's missile capabilities. The New York Times reporting Iran...
Don't act like you aren't deeply unserious. I can be, and I am, oftentimes. I mean, I literally put on a fucking doctor's frock and talk about Cussy and 9/11 in the Cars universe, okay? But then there are also moments where I'm giving you sincere and very serious analysis. You have critical thinking skills. You have the capacity to sift through the unserious parts and listen to the serious parts, right? The issue is not that. The issue is people oftentimes will say, nah, you're just like you're just a baby. You're so insecure. We mustn't listen to what you have to say. Do you think the Cars were as sad about 9/11 as the people? Yes, I think they were devastated. What? Clavicular will be live today at 5 p.m. EST with JD Vance and Jake Paul. CBS didn't get a visa for Tony Double Cirque in time for his visit, so instead of broadcasting for Beijing, they probably didn't give him the visa. That's a major L. Wait, CBS has no one on the ground in China? Oh, that has to be on purpose. There ain't no way, dog. There ain't no fucking way. Nope. That's gotta be on purpose. Oh my God. Oh, that's so funny. I'm telling you, these motherfuckers are so in tune with what's going on. All the minutia, all the comings and goings. I guess they're also still broadcasting from China, just Chinese Taipei. While the rest of the TV news world is traveling with Trump to China, CBS Evening News is broadcasting from Taiwan after the network failed to secure a Chinese visa in time for anchor Tony DeCoppel. This is not even about Tony DeCoppel. This is about CBS. I'm willing to bet China didn't want to give China did not give a visa to CBS on purpose, like a press visa to CBS on purpose, because they were like, nope, that's like Israeli news. Fuck that. Very funny. CBS News anchor Tony DeCalbo will broadcast from Taipei this week after failing to obtain a visa for China in time, a stumble in the network's efforts to play a leading role in this week's dominant global story. American broadcasters are planning extensive coverage from the Chinese capital this week. Semaphore first reported Sunday that NBC News' Tom Lamas would be anchoring from Beijing, as well as ABC News' David Muir. CBS appears to have planned similar coverage and was forced to change course at the last minute. On the CBS Morning Planning Call Wednesday, they discussed plans for DeCalbo to broadcast from the Taiwanese capital, according to a person on the call. Two people who had been briefed on the issue said DeCalbo had not been able to get a Chinese visa. L to Israel's favorite propaganda apparatus. Refresh chat. Wait, what? What's going on? Bro, they even gave a fucking visa. They even allowed Marco Rubio to come under a different name. Okay? They even gave a visa to Marco Rubio, who's currently sanctioned by the Chinese government. They just changed his name up a little bit, and we're like, sure, you can still come. That's your speculation? Yeah, Wei Zhejiang is CBS News' senior White House correspondent. So she's on the ground, but not Tony DeCalbo. He wore his Maduro tracksuit to China. Yeah. Taipei Tony, dude. That's awesome. Are you missing the soundboard? I am. The person added that DeCalbo's presence in Taipei highlighted the importance of Taiwan, which is said to be a major topic at the summit. Cope. All right, let's get back into it.
It still has retained roughly 70% of its pre-war missile stockpile and has restored
Tony about to demand a third circumcision, this time for Chinese citizenship, okay?
operational access to 30 of the 33 missile sites it maintains along the Strait of Hormuz, potentially threatening vessels transiting the waterway. On top of that, The Times reports Iran has regained access to roughly 90% of its underground missile storage and launch facilities nationwide, which are now reportedly partially or fully operational. The White House this morning pushing back, insisting Iran was crushed militarily, their ballistic missiles are destroyed, and that their production facilities are dismantled. The president calling it virtual treason to suggest Iran's military is doing well. As the stalemate with Iran drags on, the Pentagon now estimates that the cost of this war has risen to $29 billion, up $4 billion in just 2 weeks. And Americans at home are feeling the squeeze. Gas prices still up 50% since the start of the war. But the president rejecting the idea that the financial strain Americans are feeling will influence whether he makes a deal with Iran.
What extent are Americans' financial situation motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking...
Incredible. That is such an incredible fucking moment from Trump. Just another unbelievably honest moment, okay? Just, I don't give a fuck about the American working class, okay? What I care about is Iran not having a nuclear weapon, which is, for the record, bullshit, okay? And even if that was a sincere goal for the United States of America, there was one president who was able to achieve that without, using any sort of military incursion. Barack Obama did that with the JCPOA. But once again, whenever this dipshit says, oh, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, just know that he's basically just saying, I really love Israel, okay? He's just saying this was Israel's major ambition and we have to do it. We have to do it. That's daddy. Israel is my father.
About Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all.
Now, over the next 2 days.
God, he looks so shitty. I was listening to his I was looking at video footage and listening to his speeches from his first China trip in 2017. And it's actually incredible how much he has diminished since then. Obviously, it's been a fucking decade almost, but it is crazy. The difference is night and day, okay? He is a rotting carcass.
Here, there will also be plenty of pomp and ceremony. President Trump also looking to make some new announcements about investments, hoping that China will make big purchases of U.S. soybeans and Boeing aircraft. The private sector also looking to announce some wins here. President Trump bringing along with him over a dozen American business leaders, including Apple's Tim Cook and Elon Musk. But again, with the war hanging over all of this, expectations are muted. Robin.
Yep, they are. Thank you for being there for us, Mary. Thank you.
Welcome, they cried. as President Trump landed in Beijing today with a phalanx of executives, including his old frenemy Elon Musk, who hope the summit will help them make more money in China. Off he went in the Beast, the presidential limousine. Not quite such a dramatic drive as that of Daniel Craig, aka James Bond, who has swapped his Aston Martin for a BYD, a Chinese electric car. How times change. Chinese car factories, which unlike their US equivalents produce almost entirely electric vehicles, are increasingly automated. Although the US still produces more advanced computer chips, China is quickly incorporating AI into manufacture and everyday life. But President Trump still thinks tariffs are the way to rebalance trade.
Unfortunately, I don't.
I do think there's something very funny that, like, American military superiority came from our productive capabilities, okay? It came from our a distance to the conflict in World War II, obviously, and the lack of damage that the American soil withstood in comparison to all the allies and certainly the adversaries. China also has tremendous proximity to most of the things that are taking place. America has tried to bring the war to the Chinese doorstep and has, failed to do so, given the gap that China now holds over America and the rest of the world as far as their productive forces goes. It's very funny to think that America still can roll the clock back to a time when you could engage in like tariffs wars after almost 100 years of American design on global trade. Of course, Xi Jinping wants to maintain that liberal world order, as opposed to the United States of America that has carried the torch of America was the architect of the New World Order, and it was the torchbearer of the New World Order. And it dominated for decades, if not almost a century, in this global design. Not a century, but almost a century. And yeah, it's unbelievably beneficial to China because they withstood tremendous struggles, tremendous hardships in the process, and were able to take advantage of the appetite of capital for profit seeking to basically design an incredible productive force, as Adam Tooze and many others call a developmentary dictatorship, not dissimilar to what the USSR had done in the past as well, to become this not only competitive global superpower, but perhaps the next global superpower. And America's only way of dealing with this new America's only way of dealing with this new adversary is by trying to roll the clock back to allow its vassal states to engage in siege warfare. Israel, of course, I'm referencing, and then on top of that, try to wage war via tariffs. This whole system is a complex web of self-interested capitalists. It's not going to fall apart like this if you are the torchbearer for international capital. That's what America's job is. It is to protect the interests of multinational corporations. It is to protect the global design. You can't just decide, I'm going to rip apart the board and roll the clock back to 1924, okay, to 1926. You can't do that because things were far too sweet for the last 100 years, especially after World War II, for the last, the last 5-6 decades. China exported more electric vehicles than gas cars for the first time last month. Also, domestic internal combustion engine car sales fell 34% year over year. Yeah.
I think Trump really grasps the full scale of what China's trying to do on technology. I think that there's still a fairly outdated view in Washington that China is the source of low-end manufacturing, of cheap goods. I think Trump will be making a mistake to assume that kind of China is the one that he's dealing with. It's a different country with a different global reach and a different relationship with the US and the rest of the world economy.
That's obvious from last year's military parade in Beijing. Gliding through a People's Liberation Army parade like a latter-day emperor. Not that it means he's on the brink of invading Taiwan. Ever the autocrat, he's recently fired dozens of generals, so that may have to wait. He was with his natural allies, autocrats like him.
Oh my God. Autocrats. Look, they're not the free world. They're the enslaved, not us. Enslaved by the needs of capital, advancing only in the interests of parasitic international capital. Yeah, okay. Adjusted to their starting point, virtually all of these dudes on this screen, regardless of like the devious, outright repressive nature of their domestic affairs, have advanced the material conditions of their own labor force, of their own working class, with the only exception of Vladimir Putin's last like 4-year run, okay? Literally, those guys, if you adjust it to like the 90s, Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the 90s, going through unbelievable fucking famine, okay? And even Vladimir Putin, with the exception of, you know, waging war with Ukraine and completely eating away at all of the gains that he had made as far as improving the material conditions of like the Russian Federation, okay? They have had a positive trajectory in comparison, not in comparison to the Western world necessarily, but in comparison to what their starting point was, okay? Dongjimahao, I know, I say it all the time. Like, you look at these countries, okay? You look at these fucking countries. You look at these countries. Even Russia, in comparison to the aftermath of the Cold War, the end of the Cold War, is in a better position overall than it was in the 90s. Now look at America's allies. Look at Europe. Look at Japan. Okay? They have not grown. Their productive forces have diminished in the process. People's relative material conditions have worsened in the process. And the only thing that obviously hides that damage is technological innovation and the exponential growth of technology. Okay? Sometimes the United States has directly sabotaged countries like Japan. In other instances, the sabotage is less direct, like with the European Union. So yeah, these guys are fucking autocrats. True. Okay? And they're unbelievably repressive. But what is the lesson that we're showing everyone around the world? That repressive autocracies could be better at advancing the material conditions of the broader base, with the exception, once again, it feels like you can't really do a one-to-one comparison with Russia because it's a petrostate. Yo, 100%. I also am acknowledging that Russia's last 4 years have eaten away at all of the gains that Russia had made since the 90s. So if Russia was like here in the 90s and then it got here, okay, in the 2010s, it's now down here. It's still better off than where it was in the aftermath of the dissolution of the USSR, but there has been a significant diminishment of the quality of life for everyday Russian existence. And even yet, it's still in a better position overall because the bottom was achieved, okay? And as far as the Russian economy's growth, obviously it's a petrostate. So, it's a major energy provider in this world, and therefore it's not exactly a great comparison between Democratic People's Republic of Korea and China, regardless.